Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful Infosec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
Marco.
Sean.
How often do you look at that textbook from high school?
Oh man, those are in my home in my parents' home in Italy, and they don't throw away anything. So when I go there, I have all this memory from what I used to stress about. So not textbook for me, but at the time, internet wasn't the big thing. Now you find every answer you need right there, and there's the community.
All the answers are there, Marco.
If it's on the internet, yeah,
it's on the internet.
It must be true.
You just need to know how to search for it, and you can be a rock star cybersecurity professional.
There you go. There you go. Do you look at textbooks? Do you have those?
Yeah, I'm always looking at those. Always looking.
You go to the library.
No, I'm poking fun a little bit here because what we're going to get into, and I'm thrilled we have Eric Thomas on with us. Eric, thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
And there was a post on Twitter, which is where I get a lot of my inspiration from social media.
It all started with a tweet.
It always starts with a tweet.
Isn't that how it always works?
But certain things bubble up, and when I drill into them, some rise even further to the surface. And this particular post was about how we approach cybersecurity training and the way we think about that. And the response in this thread for "I'm in, sign me up," how do I do it, was pretty spectacular. So I'm like, I want to get on with Eric and talk to him about what's going on. How are we missing the mark for cybersecurity training connected to the reality of security operations and incident handling and meeting regulatory requirement, you name it, right? There's so many things to look at, privacy and all kinds of things. I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. We're going to get into the conversation. I'm going to let Marco do all the talking. I'm just joking. We're going to hear some cool stuff from Eric. And Eric, before we get into it, maybe a few words about your path and experience that led you to today and some of the things you're up to.
Absolutely. Eric Thomas, professionally, do a couple things all surrounding cybersecurity. Most of the time during the day, work as a lead cybersecurity analyst, focusing on security operations and cloud security. And then once I clock out for that one, I go ahead and clock in as an instructor for security operations and SOC analyst training for Cover 6 Solutions. And again, mostly focusing on that hands-on sort of workshop style of training, and working with peers and working with other professionals. So glad to be here. Been in IT now for about 15 years. I joke and tell people it's literally, well, it's not a joke. It's literally the only thing I've ever done. I like most millennials, I taught myself HTML so that I could have a cool MySpace. And that's where my story begins.
Nice.
So let's talk about MySpace then.
That's right. That's a good.
That's what we should talk about, man.
What happened? That was cool.
Yeah. It was cool. So let's talk about how you or why you became an instructor first, and then we'll get into some of the content elements. We see different organizations offering trainings and different courses. What prompted you to take an opportunity to create content that others could be interested in and then leverage?
That's a great question. So, like I said, been in IT for a really, really long time. And so I've taken tons of training, just invested so much time and money into training. And over those years, what I sort of noticed was I noticed a couple of things, right? Everything was centered around some certification, right? So you're learning based on these objectives of the certifications. And as I started to transition through my career, I was a network engineer before I got into cybersecurity. As I was transitioning through my career and taking this training, I realized that none of them ever taught me how to do the job. I would get the certification, right? I would learn some sort of basic terms and definition. Every single test you take is going to tell you about the OSI model, but none of them really taught me how to do the job. So I'd go and I get my CCNA, right? And now it's like, yeah, I know iOS commands, right? But do I know when I should use them? Do I have none of them gave me the critical thinking aspect of what it takes to be in technology, and even more so what it takes to be in cybersecurity. And so that was one of the things that motivated me. I wanted to create something and be a part of something that was more than just, we're going to give you the answers we're going to give you the information you need to answer these test questions, right? Or we're going to give you more than just, click here, click there. We want to tell you, okay, this is why you should click here. This is what you're looking for. And this is the thought process that goes into bridging the gap between step 1 and step 2. This is the thought process that sits right in between there. So that was sort of my motivation for training. It's a repetitive saying, but I wanted to create the thing that I wish I had, if that's the TLDR version of it.
Well, I definitely love that, and I'm going to go back into the intro from Sean with the textbook, and I go back into years and years ago when I was a student, and I feel like I'm still learning every day, right? But when you are preparing for something, a test or a certification, as you mentioned, it's almost like you just need to understand the theory and how to answer the question they ask you. But then again, you're thrown into the real world where you realize that you're never really finished with learning. So exactly. How do you confront yourself with the community, learn from the community, and write your own book as you go, as a metaphor. So I love the fact that you did that. And we had few episodes not even too long ago about the meaning and the importance of certification for this industry, which maybe more than even others it's so dynamic. So tell me the feedback that you got right on that post, and what does that tell you about this need in the community?
Yeah, so it's funny because when I made that post, it was almost me venting, right? Like I just got done taking some CISSP training, and I'm just like, God, look, don't come for me, ISC square. But I was just like, this is so just repetitive, and I mean, just it's so just, I don't know, it's so textbook-y, if you will. And so me making that post, I'm just like, hey, I really want a training that, that gives me that same feel as I would get when I would go to conference workshops, right? When you go to, these different vendors who may also do certifications, but when you go to, when you're doing Boss of the SOC at a Splunk conference, or, you're doing some of those more specific trainings with SANS, I wanted something that felt more like just those breakout sessions where, you got a bunch of professionals sitting in a room, laptops out, and we're solving a problem, and we're using real world case studies, and not the real world in air quotes case studies, but no, it's like, hey, this is actual data. This is actually what happened. This is actually how this threat actor was able to walk through these attack steps. And so when I made that post, I was just talking about that. Like, I think I don't remember the exact post, but I think it started off just by saying, I want to create a training for SOC analysts that's hands-on, that's real world. And at the time, I was still just a guest lecturer for Cover 6, right? And at the time, I wasn't. I don't want to say I wasn't serious, because I was serious that I wanted to, right? But it hadn't crossed my mind to create my own course yet, or to create my own training. And as Sean mentioned, just people started responding like, yeah, where do I sign up? And I'm just like, oh, wait, I don't have a thing yet.
There is nothing to sign up yet.
Right. People are just like, where do I sign up? Can you send me a link? And so for me, the initial reaction was, okay, at first it's like, I feel seen, right? I'm not the only one who wants this kind of training. There are other people across disciplines within technology who want something like this, because I assume that they've shared the experience that I shared, where you went and you got a certification, you passed that certification, it gets you through that applicant tracking system, and you feel confident going into that job the first day. And then they sit you down and they give you maybe you go through a couple of weeks of training or a month of training, and they sit you down and say, do something. And you're like, what? This am I supposed to create a VLAN, or, because that's the thing that was on my test. I'm really good at that.
That's right.
Right.
Just jump in. Now I want to touch on something here, because I hold a CISSP, which you're right is very textbooky. Mm-hmm. So I understand a lot in theory, and I can unpack a lot of it, and I think do a decent enough job to at least understand and communicate and talk about the subjects. I'm also a program manager by mindset, if you will. When I built products, hundreds of products I released at Symantec when I was there. So I can run a program. Marrying those two in a security operations environment, I feel I'd have a really difficult time with. And it's that connection between, here are the basics, here are the principles, here are the best practices, here are the terms, here's the lingo, here's all that stuff that you get with a certification and maybe even some trainings, and then build a program. Well, which program? Even in your description, you run security operations and cloud security. Those are two different things you call out separately. So even just that, and we interviewed CISO of TikTok. I think he had 19 practices within his security organization, mm-hmm. from policy and privacy to operations to response. And I'm not going to list them all. So how do you take a training or a set of knowledge, tie it to a program or many programs in a meaningful way? And how do you do that in some of the training that you're working on?
So I think the first thing that we kind of focus on is making sure that we take those terms, those definitions, these processes sort of that you've sort of memorized. And our first thing is to fill in the gaps, right? That's my first approach. So if you take something like, we'll say something simple that everybody's seen, right? You take something like the OSI model, right? An OSI model is going to give you all of these protocols that work at all of these layers and all of these devices that work in all these layers. And you, from a concept standpoint, learn about encapsulation and de-encapsulation, right? But do you know what that looks like on the wire? And not just as a term, right? If I gave you a PCAP and I say, hey, I need to understand what type of GET request was made, right? That's not on your certification, right? So we sort of take the foundation of those things, and I want to be clear, I'm not against certification at all, and I think some of the training that I've gotten in certifications has been fundamental to me understanding the language and making sense of the way technology people speak at all levels, right? So it's really important, but then there's a gap, right? So it's like, I can tell you how the OSI model works, but what our training does, and what I think that training for cybersecurity and even other technology disciplines should do is fill in the gaps, right? So tell me how the OSI model works on the wire. If can you find a GET request? Can you find we know about the three-way handshake, right? Can you find it? Can you tell me the two devices that it was between? And then we sort of do what's called scaffolding, which is a principle of pedagogy, right? We sort of do what's called scaffolding, where we say, okay, now you know where to find it, right? Now tell me the two systems that made that connection. And then the next layer that we add is, okay, now, is that normal for your organization? Should those two systems be talking? That's because when you're in a SOC, or even and especially when you're in a cloud environment and you're analyzing that kind of stuff, those are the things that could become important, right? Know normal so that you can detect evil. And so those are the kind of things that should become important. Should these two systems even be communicating? Why are they communicating? What type of traffic is going between those? And again, it goes into that critical thinking piece of where we have to be able to say, okay, yes, I see what's happening between these two systems because I've learned Wireshark. So I know Wireshark. I know how that technology works. I know the OSI model, so I know how that foundational principle works. But now I can take that technology that I've learned, that principle that I've learned, I can apply some critical thinking to it, and I can say, okay, based on the packet I have in front of me and other firewall logs that I have, it's not normal for these two systems to talk. So even if I'm not looking at something that's malicious right now, I need to figure out why these systems all of a sudden started talking. When did they started talking? What are they saying to each other? How often are they talking? How big are the packets that they're sending? And so that sends you down a whole nother road of that analysis process that's critical for any SOC analyst. So that's sort of how we build our training. And then there are other things. One of the first things I teach all of our students is, you just got the job. Woohoo. Yay for you. You got your acceptance letter. You're walking in to that, to the famous new hire orientation. It has nothing to do with technology. You're not sitting at a keyboard and you just want to get out of there, right? But here's the thing. You're missing one of the most critical pieces of intel you could get about your company. You're learning that organizational structure. You're learning departments. You're learning who department heads are. You're learning where and who has the information that you need. And so we always tell them to look for the who, what, when, and why, right? Who works for your company? Where are they located? So now, we've all seen it. New SOC analysts, right? They see some traffic come from Taiwan, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's a hack! There's traffic coming from Taiwan." It's like, no, we have a contractor in Taiwan, and if you would have paid attention in orientation, maybe you would have known that. So things like that, those critical thinking aspects, that organizational understanding, knowing those patterns of business activity are critical for SOC analysts, but nobody's teaching it. Nobody's telling them, hey, you got to know this stuff.
I love all that. And I'm thinking, so new hire is a one shot and you're done, but there are probably company updates quarterly, if not annually, or annually, if not quarterly, I should say. That's great advice. I'm wondering, can you give me some additional examples of some things? Because I love what you're saying. I'm going to step back here. There's the concept of security management. Mm-hmm. And then there's the questions that are driven by the concept that bring it closer to the business. And you describe, can you take a BCAP and what are you going to be looking for? Then there's the actual, what's in that tap, mm-hmm. to see the bits crossing the wire and to know what you're looking for. How important is that part? And I've done some courses at Pepperdine where the students, the thing they ask for all the time is real world data. Can you get me something that matches what I'm actually going to be looking at when I get into an organization? So how, at next level, describe to me how important or how you bring that element to the training, because it ultimately, it's that information that's going to be necessary, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually just had an example of this today. I was working with a student during my office hours, and we were talking about the authentication process, Microsoft's authentication process, right? And I said to the student, how does Kerberos work? And the student goes, explains it, TGT and KDC and blah blah blah, all that, right? Goes into that, and I'm like, okay, do you know what happens in the logs? You see that, because when you're on an investigation, knowing how Kerberos works it's important. It's pretty important, right? And that's where that security plus understanding comes in, right? It's like, I know how Kerberos works, but do you know how many log entries it's going to create, right? Do you know at which stages it's going to create those logs? Do you know what those Microsoft event IDs look like? So we sort of feel the need is to take, even if it's not actual data from a production environment, we know that we can use the real world experience of looking at logs, whether it's in Splunk or whether it's in some order seam, but looking at those logs and understanding what you're looking at, so that as an analyst, you can go in and say, oh, yeah, I see 16 log entries here, but that's pretty normal. That's pretty normal for Kerberos, because this student was going through an exercise and was like, I think something's going on, because I'm seeing 44 log entries in a matter of seconds, in a matter of milliseconds. And she's like, oh, well, there's no way a human could do that. And I'm like, well, okay, but do you understand the logs that you're looking at? And just there are a few training organizations that do that and do it very, very well. There is a point to be made there about accessibility and how well people who are new to the industry can afford those trainings, or even if they're proven enough within their organization for their organization to foot the bill for those trainings. It's very unlikely that an organization is going to take a tier 1 SOC analyst and send them to a $7,000 training to learn how to read Windows logs. So I think that we need more accessible training that teaches those real world things. Like we said, looking at PCAPs, looking at Windows event logs, knowing what to look for in those logs. Something as simple as, you're looking at a prefetch file. What do you do with it? So things like that, I think, how we can, as an industry, as trainers and as educators, start to bring that real world experience in. So, not that we shouldn't teach the process of Kerberos. I think we should teach that. Right? But after we teach that, there has to be something that says, okay, here's the process of Kerberos as a theory, right? And as a protocol. And here's what it looks like when it happens on a Windows machine.
All right. So let's get out of this technical stuff and let's yeah, sorry.
Isn't that why we're here?
That's why you invited me. No, I want to extrapolate the mental process from this and the teaching process, right? Because many times the best teacher, they say, I don't teach things to students. I teach them how to learn. Mm-hmm. And I heard that back in my day in college. And I feel like I had some really good teacher that taught me how to be analytical, how to research, how to be a librarian. Why there are so many librarians that are so good in cybersecurity? Because they have that system embedded in their head. Mm-hmm. So let's imagine maybe an opposite world from certification, where there's no certification. You have to learn with your hands on it, like the real hacker that teach himself how to hack and stuff. So obviously, I'm bringing them to the other extreme, and we're going to have to find a middle, a middle ground where this happen. But I'm wondering, maybe we're missing a little bit more hands-on experience when you do these courses, like labs in a college, in a university, and really like simulation. I don't know. Tell me, could you see a world without certification? And I know you say it's important, and I'm just being provocative here.
Can I see a world without certification? I think that's an interesting question. I think that because within the IT space, within the technical space, more and more often we're seeing companies drop their degree requirements, right? Degrees essentially are the oldest form of certification we've ever had, right? You get a degree in something, it's assumed that you've taken coursework that was relevant to doing that job. And I think that for us in the IT industry, certifications sort of supplement that, right? So I think it's hard to say because if we didn't have certification, I'm sure that we would come up with another way because companies want that confidence that candidates have at least had some sort of theoretical training on relevant terminology, on relevant definitions, on relevant technology that they're going to encounter, at a theory level. So I don't know if I can see a world without certification, and honestly, I don't know that I want to. Right? I think for candidates and for people who are entering the industry, for professionals, it gives us some sort of direction. It gives us some sort of direction. It gives us a career roadmap. Certifications do a lot now, and this may be for a whole nother podcast. I think from an HR perspective, we put way too much emphasis on certifications and what certifications candidates should have. So I do think, that's like, again, that could be a whole nother podcast itself. Right?
No, that's exactly where I wanted to go. I mean, you need certain parameters to start the conversation, but then you can't just qualify someone based on that,
or disqualify someone,
someone. Because on the other world that I was envisioning is somebody that has no certification, but you do some kind of a test when you apply for a job, and maybe turn out that you have no certification, but you know all those things.
Yep.
Just saying, could be a possibility as well. And each one of us learn in a different way. Some people are more hands-on and doing research. Some other, they need the guide of a teacher.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that the point you made about there being some sort of test, I do think there should be an alternative to certifications. I got my first official tech job, where I got paid by an actual company when I wasn't designing MySpace pages. I got my official tech job because it was a computer repair shop on campus or near campus, right? That serviced a lot of students. And I saw that they had a help wanted sign in the window back when help wanted signs were a thing. And I say it like it's a long time ago. This is in 2007. I saw that they were hiring. I went in, I told the guy, Mr. Spots, hey, I know how to remove viruses from computers. And he's like, how? I'm like, because a bunch of my friends had LimeWire and they got a bunch of viruses on their computer and practice. And, I'm sure Mr. Spots still does things the exact same way now. He had a stack of laptops that he needed to get out. And he said, show me, I'll pay you for the day. And that's it. He told me that was like a Thursday. He said, hey, can you come back Monday and fill out some paperwork? At the time I was 17, so I had to get, a few things. He had to fax them to my parents because in the States, we have certain child labor laws. But yeah, that's how it worked, right? And that was sort of that test. Now, I think to get there, though, that's where training comes in, right? Because if we're going to use that as some sort of a metric, then we have to be able to give people the training that's required for them to get those skills. We have to do it in high school. We have to do it, in colleges. And so to me, what that says is we got to teach them how to think, right? We have this we have this hack, hunt, tweet, repeat approach to cybersecurity training, where it's like, no, we got to teach you how to think. Do you know what question to ask? So
and I want to spend some time on this with you, Eric, because as you were saying that, I was hoping you would go with the hack, hunt, tweet, repeat point, because there seems to be a lot of focus on hacking and maybe less on defense. But in your story, where you went into to respond to the help wanted, you focused on the outcome.
Mhm.
I want to remove viruses that are impeding people from using their computer.
Mhm.
And all too often, I think we get hung up in how do I break that, or how does this technology work, and forgetting the point that there's a business or an important process that somebody's using that's being impacted. How important is that, and how does thinking critically become even more important when you focus on the outcome?
I think it's extremely important. There's and you've been in cybersecurity long enough to know that we have this term, right? The business. And we use it almost as if they're separate from us. And it is terrible. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible way of thinking. Separating the business from ourselves is the type of thinking that as an industry we got to get rid of. Why? Because it creates training that is super isolated to what we want to do as security professionals, right? And it does take away from defense, right? Because people want to work without the influence of the business, because hacking things is more fun and getting into things is more fun, right? Trying to work with the business so that they can stand up this application that's critical to increasing revenue, and you dealing with the stress of trying to make it more secure is not, right? The business says, no, you have to have this application. And as a security professional, we have to get used to the yes and type of approach to it, right? We got to stop saying no so much. We got to stop saying no. We got to stop saying, oh, that's bad. And I'm not talking about the obvious things, right? The business comes and says, well, we don't like using passwords that are longer than 7 characters. Oh, okay. You gotta stop that, right? But it's like, I think that when we start to think critically and we have that objective based approach, instead of saying I have to protect my company from somebody who's going to do recon and then get action on objective, we have to say, no, I want to enable my company to do this business critical mission safely and by avoiding risks that brings on any compliance issues, any criminal issues that we may encounter. So it's all about how we think. And so as trainers and as educators, we have to approach it from that standpoint. You don't come to my course to learn technology and learn how to be a better hacker or even learn how to be a better blue teamer. You come to my course to, first of all, understand the importance of the work of a SOC analyst or a cloud security analyst. You come to my course to understand that. And then the second thing we're going to teach you is that your primary objective is to enable the business to make money because they sign the checks. So that, I think that objective based approach is what creates future leaders in our industry. Because they want to enable business, right? They don't want to impede anything. We've all heard it. What's the easiest way to make sure something is absolutely secure, right? Just unplug it. Just unplug it, turn it off. Don't let anything talk to it. But that's also a 100% guarantee way to make sure that your company goes under. Right. Because you can't use the technology. So yeah, that objective-based approach is really, really important. And I think as educators and trainers, we have to approach how we train with that mindset. And that's sort of one of my gripes about that, the whole let's hack and the capture the flag style of learning, right? It's nobody gives you context. Nobody gives you context.
Yeah, I love that. And it's kind of mix what Sean said and where you're going with this, where maybe make it more focused to smaller objective, because some people may get into this industry thinking, I want to, the only way I have to feel that I'm good and not have the famous imposter syndrome is if I know everything. Well, maybe the first thing you want to teach these kids is you can't know everything.
Yes.
It's like, I want to be an engineer. Well, an engineer of what? Electronic engineer? You want to make bridges? What do you want to make? Airplanes? I mean, you can't be everything.
Animatronics.
Is that your qualification?
It is.
So yeah, I mean, that's very important. To teach how to learn, it's extremely important. I think the community is doing an excellent job in doing this.
Yes.
At least to go back on Twitter, I'm sure MySpace would have done an excellent job as well, but we would never know. So how about finishing with some basic tips that, I know you've been kind of sprinkling this through the entire conversation, but if you want to sum it up for, in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, whatever your call, like the most important things, honestly, that we could do now to make this training better.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we have to, and this is across security, we have to stop marketing fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right. We have to stop approaching everything in cybersecurity, from an APT standpoint. Right. Now, that's not to say we won't see them. And that's not to say that things like ransomware and those serious incidents, they really affect the company. But we have to stop using that as a learning tool. We have to stop. I often say less critical alert and more critical thinking. Right. So that's the first thing. And when somebody's starting off, let's not give them these use cases and scenarios of, APT 31, let's not give them those use cases, right? Let's give them a use case of, can you figure out if you're looking at these logs or these events, how do you determine what normal is? I think that's the first step, starting with let's learn what's normal. Let's get back to the basics. You don't have to know how a Windows kernel works, right? You don't have to know, by memory, the process of a, power on self-check or self-test, right? But you need to understand, hey, what's the first process that starts on a Windows system? What's process ID number 4 and why is it important? What does it mean when you see something as simple as task manager, when you see a process start from a child item, right? So learning those basics before we get into, can you detect privilege escalation, I think is important, in teaching those basics. Some other things, excuse me, I said it before, we got to get away from the hack, hunt, tweet, repeat style of training. Everything's not about hacking in cybersecurity and information security. Everybody's not going to be a pen tester. There has to be somebody who wants to work on the defensive side of things and who wants to work with red teams and pen testers to fix the problem, because pen testers, their objective is to fix these problems too, right? They just have a different skill set. One of my best friends, Tanisha Martin, founder of Black Girls Hack, shout out to her, is a red teamer. And I learned just as much from her as I'm sure she learns from me, So we have to get away from the, let's hack this thing type of mentality. And we have to really get to a critical thinking process approach. Do you know what questions to ask? Do you know if that's normal? Do you know how to figure out if it's normal? Can you identify patterns? Pattern matching is so important as an analyst. Being able to say this user did the same thing for the last 20 days. And, this user did the same thing every week. This process happens. So I can rule this out as a normal behavior so that I can identify the other stuff. So I think those are some tips as far as what we need to do as an industry for education. And then for learners, I want to say practice critical thinking, practice pattern matching, focus on the fundamentals, and try to understand the why of everything you do. When you learn a term, when you learn a skill, if you take a course on Wireshark, the first question you should ask the instructor is, why do I need to use Wireshark? Why do I need to know what's in a packet capture? And some of those things, there's a lot. Maybe one of these days I'll do a book or a blog post or something.
Well, you have to let us know when you do that, so we can continue down this path. I think as you're describing all those things, and I'm not going to be a practitioner. I'm past that point in my life. But as I'm thinking about this,
good for you.
Somebody thinking about getting started, there's so much in there that perhaps people might be overwhelmed with so many tips. Is there, I want to close with one. Is there one place to start? I know there's more than one, but if there's one place you could recommend how to get that first question raised so you know to ask it, or that first thing to look at so you know what you're looking at, how does somebody, is it social media and peers like yourself, or what's the answer there?
If I got to give one thing, I do think social media is super important. Reaching out, networking, asking, somebody who works as a SOC analyst or somebody who works as an engineer, hey, what do you do every day? Not about a specific technology, not about a certification. What do you do every single day? What's the one thing that you do every single day? You ask a SOC analyst, depending on where they work, they might say, you should know how to analyze phishing emails, right? You ask an engineer, if you're going to that level, and they may say, you should know how to extrapolate what the customer needs from what the customer says they need. So I think just networking and reaching out is really, really important. And I think that'll guide you down the right path. Also, I'm going to slide one in here on you. I'm going to cheat. John Strand has a talk from years ago about breaking into Infosec, Black Hill Security. It is an amazing talk. And he goes through some really good things like learning an operating system and learning a scripting language and things like that. So I think that reaching out to the community, and I always recommend that to people.
Love it.
Cool. And of course, if you're interested, my Twitter handle's there if you like to reach out to me for any.
We'll include that and perhaps some other resources you want to share with us as well. And sounds like you're open to, if you're sharing your Twitter handle, open to questions through social media anyway. And I don't know, this has been super enlightening for me. I think it's something we miss. We focus on both ends of this book, and I think we're using this book incorrectly. We're using it to hold the room to the knock open. So you don't have to swipe your badge to get in. Right, there are better ways to learn, and Eric, I'm thrilled to have you on the show to share your experience and how you learn and how you're sharing that and paying it forward.
Absolutely. We had a great time.
Yeah, this was fun. Maybe next time you come on, you tell us a little bit about hip hop history and you being a home chef.
Oh yeah. We can definitely talk about my terrible meals and hip hop music.
Let's do that. Okay, we'll plan that.
Hopefully everybody else, like myself, is thinking a bit here and taking some notes to take some action. So thanks everybody for joining. We'll catch you on some redefining security in the future.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.